Hey everybody, it's Dick here. I'm in the United States for the holidays, visiting family and friends, and this is one of my old friends, a 1980 Yamaha XS400 Special, which I've customized, and I'm going to do a little video on it so you guys see what I've done and why I love it so much. I purchased this bike sight unseen off of Craigslist. I had my father-in-law go and pick it up with a trailer that he has for his work. Brought it back. It was fire engine red with big bull handlebars, king queen seat, and everything just generally stock. The lollipop, turn signals, and everything that made the XS in the 80s ugly, but which makes it cheap and hides all of the glory that's underneath the poor choices of whatever the designers were thinking in Japan about what American cool was back in the 70s and 80s. That's a stock tank. There's a lot of people who try and change out the tanks for Sportster tanks. It works better on the spine of the XS650. The spine underneath that one is kind of a tripod that hides all of the wires, and anytime I try and put a smaller tank on these things, it's just a disaster. But I found a way to hide the ugliness, I think, or accentuate the ugliness. My love of British bikes made me put the old Triumph tank rack that I found online. It has a little dents and dings in it, but it's a relatively good example. I didn't bother screwing into the tank and setting threads. I just used a bit of JB weld because I'm not going to be carrying any gear on it. I just want it there for the aesthetic. So there's a little cheat for everyone who wants to put a rack on a bike but doesn't want to get involved with drilling out your tank. I'm not one to hide. A lot of people hide the Japanese vintage of their tanks. They unscrew them, they bondo that spot, they put some other graphic on there. I'm proudly riding a Japanese bike, and I'm impressed with the Japanese build quality and reliability, so I'm not one to hide what I'm riding underneath me. What I did do on this bike was take the stock 2-to-2 megaphone exhaust off, and I put on this Yamaha 2-to-1 sport exhaust that was available as an option in the 80s. It's got a nice big dent there. I love that dent. And it comes out to the end, and it gives a little more horsepower. I have a stock version with the 2-to-2, and this goes a little bit quicker. It's not a sport bike in any sense. I mean, it's 400, so it's got a nice sound, it's got a nice pep, and this just gives a little bit more. I'm a sucker for spoked wheels, especially on classic bikes. This bike came with these cast wheels. They were black, had some polished elements to it. Really lowered the bike visually. Really quite ugly. In a past bike that came with mag wheels, I went through the process of finding old hubs, laced them up at Hagen, wheels with 21-inch on the front and 18-inch on the back, and made kind of a chopper bobber type thing. That was a pain in the ass, and the wheel set cost $2,000, so I wasn't going to do that in this case. So I went ahead and made them white, and it kind of accentuates the 80s-ness of the bike, and points out the ugliness but kind of celebrates it in another way. I tried to get them powder coated, tried to get them painted. Turns out all those processes would have cost more than I spent on the actual bike. So what I did, I went ahead and I used this glorious stuff, Plastidip. There's a whole lot of videos on Plastidip. I won't spend too much time talking about it, but if ever you want to change the nature and color of your bike and not go through the process of paint, and if you change your mind, you can peel it off. Talking about the 80s and the 80s style of the bike, the biggest kind of takeaway from this bike that people notice first is the skateboard seat. That's an old vintage Vision deck that I used to ride, and I had an idea of sanding it down to bare wood, and it turns out that there was this blue layer of plywood on it, and I didn't notice that there's blue and red plywood, and the red so you can see on the bottom. And no matter what sanding I did, I couldn't get that blue down. I ended up sanding away a bit of a whale and some beachfront there, so I kept it and made a kind of a beach motif, a little surfer style, but I think that might change in the future. On the back is a translucent red Bones skateboard wheel with an red LED inside of it, and it illuminates the whole wheel illuminates, and it's a very, very bright and effective tail light, and I'm very pleased with that choice there. Everyone asks me if it's uncomfortable to ride on the skateboard seat. It actually isn't. I kind of think of it when we were kids, we would go to the big hills and sit on our asses and slide down the hill on our boards, and that's kind of what you do on this 400. You hop on the board and you barrel down the road and you feel like a kid again. Up front here, I've drastically changed the stock nature of the bike. I put some Clubman bars that you can get on eBay or off of Amazon or somewhere, just to do a little bit of a drop bar, classic style thing. I took off the big, wide silver headlamp and put on kind of a little chopper headlamp, or a little bobber headlamp that I got from a friend of mine. He de-chromed it, so you can't see it in this light, I don't think, but it's more nickel and yellow than the chrome ring. The Speedo I'm really happy with is, that's a custom-made wooden inset for it. It mimics the plywood stack of the maple deck on the skateboard, so I really quite like that a lot. I did go ahead and stain it blue on the surround, but if I change the seat, I'm going to go ahead and change that as well. That Speedo I found on eBay, and it's a new old stock 70s, kind of looks like a squash jelly bean, and I really quite like it. It is in kilometers per hour, but I haven't gotten any issues registering or inspecting the bike in New York, so keep that in mind if you're going to buy one of those. But I really do like that style and that feel. Ran the cables through these handlebars, which at that 90 degree, or it might even be more than a 90 degree bend, cables to the end for these Hella style, I'm not sure, old BMW style turn signals at the end of the bars, which always are a little bejeweled, and folks in the US always do a second take on those, and they're nice and bright. So the cockpit's quite good. It is a bit dusty, and there's some cobwebs, and there's a bit of corrosion that I just noticed around the, I guess, the leaking reservoir. It probably looks a little empty from here, but in the summer when I fire it up, everything will be checked, and I might not dust it off, but I'll get rid of the cobwebs. But I kind of like the dust. I've done the same Hella bar end. There's a little modification I needed to do to make these work, because they use a plunger style mounting if you're putting it in a headlamp. I wanted to keep it uniform with the turn signals on the front, and I think it has a nice look altogether. I repositioned the ignition switch underneath the bottom yokes of the fork there. It kind of just makes the top cockpit area cleaner, and it also prevents people from stealing your keys on these kind of hijacks that we've been seeing around, especially around London. Not so much in New York or rural New York, but it's always good to hide where your key is if someone's trying to nick your bike. This has a cone air filter on it. Usually the air filter is a big kind of lunchbox that sits behind that case there. The cone filters look cool. A lot of people do them, especially in London, but you'll find that the box filters actually help the performance of your bike a lot better than these cone filters. These cone filters do not like humidity, they don't like the rain, they don't like the cold. So a lot of people will change out their cone filters thinking they're getting some more performance, a little more horsepower, but they'll end up finding they're making their bike a little more temperamental. So just keep that in mind, but this does have the cone filters on it. And the actual only chopping I did to this frame, besides the chopping I needed to do to modify it for the skateboard seat, is right here. I cut off a hoop here for the passenger rear set. A lot of people say they read choppers, and there's lots of different definitions about what a chopper is. If you don't change the rake of the front of your bike, or if you don't get rid of the suspension system on the back of your bike, you haven't chopped it. But under the purest sense of a term of a chop, it's anytime you actually cut something off of your bikes. A lot of people cut off the frame tabs. Here's the hoop I was talking about. I've left that because I have to hang this big can off of it. on this side. But that's the hoop where the passenger rear footrest would have been on the other side. Like I said, a lot of people cut off the tabs, they grind these things off, they grind these things off, and they kind of really try and streamline the bike. Early on it was for weight saving so they can get faster on their low displacement bikes. Now I think it's more for aesthetics or for the fun of chopping. Everyone loves the sparks flying off a grinder. But that's relatively the only chop I've done on this bike. So there he is. His name is Ollie, for this first skateboard trick that everyone learns when they get a skateboard. Looking forward to riding Ollie this summer when it's a bit warmer outside. The XS series of bikes have a special place in my heart, and in particular the 400s.